Before we move on to the next game, I thought it would be interesting to take a little peek at some of the artwork of Metal Gear Solid 4. Now, this is by no means a super comprehensive look, but it's just a couple interesting things I thought were worth pointing out. Because every game has unused, unfinished content, ideas change, you know. But I think some of the concept art of Metal Gear Solid 4 is particularly interesting. It shows a very different game, and some of it is actually stuff that would appear in later games. So first here, we have this very incredible piece of key art. I actually remember when this came out. But it was interesting because this had come out a little after they had shown the first trailer. And already there's some differences, some questionable things. For one, we see Snake here. And he's not using a design that he uses in the final game. Most obviously, he's lacking the load-bearing vest, but there's some other differences with the suit details. Doesn't quite look like the Octo Camo that he has in the final game. There's another sort of rare piece of artwork for this Snake design, and it points out something that you can see a little bit here, but is much more apparent here, is that Snake is not old in this artwork. At the very least, he doesn't have the mustache, but even so, his hair is colored in much darker than in the final game. What's particularly interesting about this piece of art is that, if I can, there we go, it's actually used for an art book cover later on, which is very odd because this is not a depiction of Solid Snake from any of the games. It's just a completely unused design. Now, in addition to that, you can see prominently there is a very emaciated-looking corpse, I assume, of Big Boss, which actually caused a bit of a stir. When this artwork came out, the director actually said, "I have no idea why they put Big Boss in there. That has nothing to do with the game." We know, obviously, that was just a bit of damage control. But still very funny because, yeah, one of the biggest spoilers, I suppose, of the game was just very clear to see from an early promotional standpoint. In addition to that, everyone just looks a little bit different from what we see in the final game. Liquid Ocelot here, he's got one rolled up sleeve. He's actually, it looks like his arm is inside of the coat and the sleeve is free-flowing here. But Raiden is also very interesting because you can see he's holding a very, very hilariously drawn baby Sonny. So this is interesting because I was pretty vocal at the beginning of MGS4 while playing it that I don't really love where it is in the timeline. I don't really love the accelerated aging of Snake. And I think that just that decision as a through line was a little odd. Well, looking at Sunny here, this is not an 8-year-old that she is in the final game. I believe she's like 7 or 8. But this is, I mean, this is hardly even a 2-year-old. I believe Sunny would have been 1.5 to 2 years old by the end of Metal Gear Solid 2. So it's very strange that this looks like an infant, but we'll see some more artwork that kind of shows that they really had no idea early on what point in the timeline this game was going to be, how many years after Metal Gear Solid 2. In addition to that, we've got some other artwork here of some of Old Snake's civilian outfits. This one's not used at all. I suppose it's a variation of what he wears in the Nomad. There's the suit he has in the beginning of the game. And I'm assuming this is an early version of what would later become the Gillian Seed outfit for Act 3. Again, no facial hair whatsoever here, so I guess there was always the plan for some form of a young Snake to appear even after Old Snake was decided on. Though if you look, he does clearly have a beard here. And here's a little more evidence that, yes, early on, you know, I say I don't really like Old Snake as a concept, because I think he just kind of... I think it's just superfluous. You know, I mentioned you've already got nanomachines and 2 versions of Foxdie to worry about. Him also, you know, having his accelerated aging be a major plot point, I think it just muddles up the game a little bit. Well, you can see here, not only was there some artwork of a younger naked Snake drawn early on, there's also this incarnation of Snake that, again, definitely younger, but it's a very interesting design. It sort of has shoulder pads and the neck guard, like the MGS-1 suit, but still a load-bearing vest in the front. It's very interesting. Now, down here, this is from the Old Snake phase of development, where this text blurb here, I'll summarize, basically says something like, early on they decided they wanted Snake to have an eye patch similar to MGS3 of some kind of eye patch. And the idea was to combine it with night vision goggles. There's a couple variations here. And I think this is basically saying something like, you know, making it too much like goggles, look a little too sci-fi, so they simplified and streamlined the design for the final game. Now, if Snake wasn't interesting enough with how all over the timeline, all over the ages, this game could have taken place, let's take a look at some Sunny artwork. Now, this one's pretty similar to her final design. This is just cute. I think the bedhead in pajamas, that's a funny look for her. But here we've got some earlier concept art. I like a lot of these. They're very fun. I love the big goggles and the little candy she's got. Of course, you can see the eggs. That was always meant to be there. But what gets really interesting is when we move to some of the designs a little further. Now, this design in particular, keep in mind this general vibe of like the schoolgirl outfit, this type of boots, the curly hair, and the large hood. Keep that in mind for a future title, because we'll be revisiting that. And this design also, in the face and hair, just keep those two in your pocket for the future. You may know what I'm alluding to, but in any case, here we have you know, the goggle design again. But what's interesting with these, and I believe the prior art here, yes, this blurb essentially says that the time frame and the setting was not determined yet, so they created artwork for Olga's daughter at various ages. Some of them, of course, we saw the little tiny baby Sunny in Raiden's arms, which again, that looks like a newborn. That doesn't look like a 2-year-old to me. But we've even got some older teen, young woman, somewhere in that sort of age for Sunny. So I bring this up after Snake just because, you know, I remember early on, a lot of people were like, oh, I don't really like the old Snake look. And to this day, he's still not the most popular look for Solid Snake. MGS2 Snake, of course, is the most popular look. That's why he's in Smash Brothers and Fortnite. But, you know, the excuse was always, well, he had to look like that because of the accelerated aging and the time the game takes place in. And yeah, it's pretty clear from a lot of these early concepts. That was not set in stone. That was not solidified, if you will, as early on as a lot of people think. This is another one that I just think is cute. I like the long-haired Sunny look. She's very spooky. It's just an interesting design that I quite like. And now here we return to the almost newborn-looking Sunny and a very different-looking Raiden. I think this Raiden design is quite cool. And the concept here is interesting because this blurb is basically saying that you can just barely make out this is like a thunder drum design. Sunny's rattle. And what would happen is, if you stand still for too long, say you're hiding somewhere, Sunny would get bored and start shaking the rattle and alert guards. And here you can even see an early, very rough depiction of a gecko. So, you know, by the time they had Gecko patrolling sighted on, they still weren't really sure when the game was going to take place, which is interesting. But even more interesting is the implication then that Raiden would have been playable in some form. I would have liked that. I think it would have been a interesting, you know, a little bit of a homage to Metal Gear Solid 2. I think a game where you start as Raiden but switch to Snake, I think that would be cool. I think they could still do something like that, and it would be interesting. Next, we'll take a look at this Big Boss artwork here, and something might stand out to you. Something you might notice is the eye patch is on the other side. So this text is basically describing that the setting and everything hadn't been decided on. So details like the eye, and this is very vague, there's further information about this, but the eye patch being on the wrong side could have been because he was, you know, put back together using Solidus's body. But there's another piece of information that says this design could also have been used for Solidus. I forget where it comes from. It might be the back of the art book, or it might have been an interview somewhere that said Solidus was meant to return in Metal Gear Solid 2 and be the one piloting Rey in the Shadow Moses Act. But regardless, the most interesting thing about this design to me is you can just barely see what looks like, and this text here does mention it, the sneaking suit from Metal Gear Solid 3. And it's basically saying that, yeah, maybe he would have been a boss fight, but we thought the idea of putting the sneaking suit underneath the coat would have been just like a cool design. And it's very funny to me because we saw this before with your boy Gene from Portable Ops. You can't hide from Portable Ops. But yes, very interesting that this combined with the earlier image shows that Big Boss's inclusion was something that early on, even before they decided, you know, if he was going to be a boss fight, if he was going to be fully Solidus's body, if, you know, either way they wanted to include him from a very, very early stage. And I think that's very interesting as well. Next up, we'll take a look at Ocelot. And there's not a whole lot of differentiation in Ocelot's designs. We saw earlier he didn't have the shirt underneath of his coat, which of course he uses that look later in the game. But what's interesting here is a very different looking cyborg arm, very lower tech. But I do like the design and the shaping. Here, of course, is his final cyborg arm, very sleek, has a lot of these muscle fibers and sort of like an octo camo that fades into a more realistic hand. I think it's funny that the fading into a realistic hand with fingerless gloves was always part of the design, because you could have just as easily put a full-fingered glove over his hand if you wanted to hide the robot arm. But what's particularly interesting about this to me is this is actually a redo of an idea from Metal Gear Solid 2, which of course this would have changed things significantly plot-wise, but yes, in the MGS2 art book and in early drafts, there's an idea for Ocelot to have a mechanical arm of his own. Obviously, they went with the Liquid Snake ghost possession. But it's funny to think that the cyborg arm in MGS4 is a reference to an unused concept from MGS2. That's why I like to look through these, because there's a lot of fascinating stuff that otherwise you just wouldn't know, wouldn't really get. So here's some mechanical designs that went unused or heavily tweaked. And this is a crime. This gecko formation is seen nowhere in the final game. I think this is hilarious and would have been a very funny thing to fight against. Just a cluster of gecko looking kind of like a grape noise from Symphogear with just a ton of guns. Very funny. This is another interesting one. This is a completely unused hand unit. Whether this was a alternative to Dwarf Gecko or what, I couldn't really tell from any of the text, but it's very creepy, very slug-like. You can see here, this is similar to Gecko in that it has 3 arms with little hands. So I don't know. Either way, it's creepy, and I kind of hate it, and I would love to see it in a future game because of how terrifying it is. Here is, of course, the Gecko. Very similar to its final design, but I wanted to point out these rough ideas here. This one using a more mechanical leg design, which I think looks pretty cool. And this, which has a very similar head shape, but is in, to me, this reads as a transforming Metal Gear. That it would go from walking mode to a rolling mode of some kind, or maybe it's a variant with different legs. Either way, I just think it's pretty cool. And of course, we keep in mind the idea of transforming Metal Gear. We would see that in a future game as well. Here are some other early Metal Gear designs. All of these are really sleek, really cool. I don't know if this car was a Metal Gear or is just some crazy PMC cyber car. Not to be confused with a cyber truck, of course, but it's very, very sleek looking, very cool. Here, again, we have something that kind of has the shape of Outer Haven with almost ray-like legs. It's, again, very cool looking. This one has some sort of quadrupedal, maybe a tread-like situation. I don't know. I like the front silhouette, though. It's very chunky, very reminiscent of Metal Gear D. But what's particularly fascinating to me is this one, Metal Gear Zork, I guess, is the name. That's a very funny name. Keep the name Zork in mind, because we'll be seeing something, hearing something similar enough to that in a future game. But also, remember when we did the motorcycle chase, and I said, I know it would have been a bit of a cop-out, but, like, they could have just brought out another Shagohod or something. That would have been cool. Well, I guess someone did think that would have been cool, because if you look at this, it has a very Shagohod-esque design. Of course, it's smaller, but still. I'm a big mecha fan, so a lot of these unused mecha designs are cool to me. I like to think that maybe, you know, in-universe, in like a future title or a side game or something, it would be neat to see these as canonical offshoots of Gecko or other things. Here's another very cool, very sleek-looking Metal Gear variant, looking a bit like Gander from the Game Boy game, but what's particularly interesting to me here, again, keep this in mind for a future title, these little rolling ball tire things in the feet, so it could, like, skate around as well as walk. I think that's a neat design, and again, is something we will see in a future title. Here is the powered suit. You remember there was the unused codec call that we listened to that, I mean, it didn't imply as much as it outright stated that these were meant to be fought in regular gameplay. And they're very detailed, very well designed. I like all the other paneling and little thing. Like, I guess this is like a little thruster. They did do boost jumps in the game. You can see how the soldier fits in there, and he's got special gear, special little harnesses and such. It's a very cool design, and yes, here's a rough version, pretty similar to the final design. But what's very interesting about this is that there's this variation as well. A lot more high-tech. I kind of prefer this one. I feel like this, although I do like the design, particularly when you see the 3D model, short of the legs, it's a little generic. From the back, it looks a lot more Metal Gear, but from the front, that could be in just about any sci-fi shooter game. This silhouette, however, I think is a lot cooler, and number one, it's very similar to the mecha from Police Knots. But, oh, of course, and you can see it says police on it right there, so that's definitely an intentional reference. But what's, to me, very interesting is this whole idea is another concept that, once again, was intended for Metal Gear Solid 2 and never used. There were going to be powered suits. You can see the name Metal Blade here. I assume that would have been the name for them in-game, and yes, you can see it repeated here, Metal Blade Unpublished. But they're a very cool design, and you can see it has a lot of similar traits to the powered suit, but more similar traits to the Police Knot suit here. Whoops. Here we have Mount Snakemore, and this blurb basically says that it was intended to have 0, and looking at it, that kind of looks like 0 to me. Although here, that also sort of looks like it could be 0. It's difficult to make out, but yeah, I like the idea that maybe this was meant to be the founding members of the Patriots, because it's really hard to make out who is who. One of these is definitely 0. One of these could be Ocelot. One of them could be Big Boss. Either way, the Mount Snakemore lineup was a little different early on, and I think that's funny. I like the idea of it being the Patriots. To me, personally, I think that would have been very, very funny. Now, here's a very, very important design. This is something we will definitely be seeing very soon. This is what looks like some sort of mechanized soldier variation of the Haven Trooper. Very thick, very gorilla-like. Large arms with mounted machine guns. We're going to be seeing this used in the next game we'll be taking a look at, and I think that's cool. Here, more variations on that design, this time with a lady piloting it, wearing it? I don't know. Is it a mecha or a suit? I don't know. I guess, would you say piloting a powered suit? Either way, both of these designs are pretty sick. I like the masked, hooded version, but the Hime cut look, you know, it's very like a pretty lady upper portion of the face with this massive, horrifying robot body. It's very Beauty and the Beast in aesthetic, but just a little weirder. I really do like a lot of these. Speaking of a little weirder, yeah, here's some other early concepts for, you can see particularly Laughing Octopus here is portrayed. This would have been really creepy had she moved around like that. And, you know, hey, if Python didn't give you enough Hellraiser action, well, yeah. This is very reminiscent of Screaming Mantis. So you can see a lot of these were just, again, very early concepts, but very, very creepy in a way that I really like. Here's some more just general creepy, horror-esque mecha designs. Again, we see this shape with the large arms. And this skull-like mask, I think, is very cool. These are things that would, again, later get incorporated into other designs. This style of art, this more sketchy, the lines are sketchier, but overall, this is cleaner. I just looked up the artist's name, and I can't recall it now, but this is not Shinkawa's art. This is the other main artist for Metal Gear, and their artwork oftentimes is used for, like, just really early tone setting stuff that then is built off of. And yeah, you can see a lot of this here. It's a little over the top compared to what's in the final game, but I like that. I think I would like to see these types of designs adapted into Metal Gear. This almost like techno-organic body horror sort of thing. And of course, a little more of this artist stuff. You can see a snake-like soldier who their tail could open and reveal some legs. Again, these are all very early B&B concepts, but they're so sick. I would love to see these revisited. These helmets are really cool looking. Apparently it's meant to resemble a sheep in some way. I just really love this little doodle here. It's a lot of why I wanted to show this off, but yeah. Lots of really, really neat unused stuff. Some of it would end up showing up in later games. Some of the general tone of this stuff would end up popping up again in the future. But some of it, unfortunately, lost to time. Legless Twintail, also, I am Legbis? It's probably meant to be legless. Finally, onto some unused characters. The first of which is the horribly named Snake Man. So, basically, this is, I don't think there's much significant here. I did translate the text, and read through it before this, but it's basically just saying they really liked this design and wished it had been used because it is pretty cool looking. What I think is interesting about this is, to me, this Snake Man. This looks like Raiden wearing Solidus's armor, just with more little tendrils as opposed to the giant snake arms. And not only that, if we look at this artwork of Solidus, kind of in a similar pose. I don't know if that's intentional or what, but you can see, especially with the shaping of the arms and the shoulders, I mean, that looks like Solidus's armor. There's no word on what this was. This text isn't very useful in telling us what it was, but yeah, I don't know. Looks like Raiden wearing a Solidus suit as the Snake Man. This next one is a completely unused character known as Adam. Yes. The idea was basically to have a masked character who, when removing the mask, is very handsome. That would later get inherited by Johnny. But the design and overall concept, I mean, look at this face. Look at these mannerisms. Is that not just Major Ocelot? And to make things stranger, you can see this suit looks very similar, especially these valves here on the thighs. Looks very similar to the Soviet sneaking suit from Metal Gear Solid 3. And there's another text blurb on this page that mentions that this character was meant to be tied to the Russian PMC, the Ocelot's Grasp or Clawing Ocelot, whatever it translates to. The 5th PMC that's actually not ever fought against in Metal Gear Solid 4. So I wonder if this wasn't drawn with the intention of having a sort of return of the younger Major Ocelot, maybe as like a, you know, like, I mean, Ocelot was not sterile. Maybe he could have had a kid. Maybe it was a clone. I don't know. Either way, I like this idea. I think it's a cool design. You can see he's also got a handgun in one hand, a knife in the other. So it's, again, the MGS3 vibes are through the roof. And then finally, this is just charming. This is the original Johnny from Metal Gear Solid 3. He's referred to as Akiba's grandpa. You can see he's got a little J on his bolo tie. He was meant to appear at the end for the wedding, for Meryl and Johnny's wedding, but just simply didn't show up. I believe he's included in the novelization, however. So, in my heart, Johnny's grandpa is canon. But that's going to be it. Again, a lot of stuff that we'll be seeing again, just stuff that contextualizes future designs and future games a little better. So I figured I'd take this opportunity to take a look at everything. And if you would like to take a look at more of the MGS4 art book, I highly recommend it because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And there's a lot of really cool commentary and other things. But that's going to be it. And I think we are finally done with Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots.